Hi, this is Zach with the Walthers Showroom Update. Today we've got an extra special session for you here at the Timber River Railway with John Tews. John, what can you tell us about your amazing layout?
Well, first of all, welcome to the Timber River Railway.
Thank you.
The Timber River Railway is an iron ore railroad that's in the upper part of Wisconsin, up northwestern Wisconsin, and then the Arrowhead of Minnesota, to represent typically what goes on in the Iron Range of Minnesota, and hauling the iron ore from the mines down to the docks at Superior, Duluth, where it gets loaded into boats and gets shipped onto the steel mills.
It's quite an operation. So I noticed that it has a lot in common with those particular railways, but you've got your own railway that you're operating here.
Yeah, I decided that I wanted to wind up doing something that was more generic to the area and not specifically modeling a specific railroad, because people are nitpicking about this detail and that detail. So I can take a pair of Walthers SD7 locomotives that are painted for the BL&E, put Timber River on them, and it's perfectly all right.
All right, well, let's learn a little bit more about the railway itself.
Well, the railroad actually starts out at Alloway Yard, which is a yard that's on the Great Lakes, the Duluth Superior area, and runs all the way from there up to International Falls, Canada, where it interchanges with the Canadian National and Duluth, Winnipeg, and Pacific. And the reason for that is the grain traffic that comes out of the Great Plains that comes down to the Great Lakes Terminal. So that gives me, besides iron ore, it gives me grain and manifest traffic over the railroad, which gives you the feel of what actually happens up in the Iron Range. I wanted to model the concept of the iron ore range and the traffic that goes through it up in the iron ore area, but I wanted to wind up making it myself, my own railroad, and I started out when our kids were small with the Tewsville Railroad, and I wanted to keep TRR because I lettered a lot of equipment TRR.
Oh, okay,
and
that works perfect.
So Timber River Railway turned out to be just fine, and I originally modeled logging, and now I'm into iron ore in the upper part of Minnesota. And so we have the Timber River Railway that runs from the Duluth Superior Harbor up into the Iron Range and up to Canada.
All right, John, so the purpose of this video really is to show the viewers the implementation of the brand new Cornerstone 110-foot turntable in HO scale, and you've got that here in your All-Wes shop that you've incorporated, that you're now servicing locomotives with. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, the old 105-foot turntable was scratch-built, and it was 35 years old, and it was kind of time to look at some kind of replacement. The 110-foot table, with a little modification to the pit area, turned out to be just the cat's meow for installing in the Timber River shop area. And the shop area, as we talked before, is very important because all the trains that come into the Alloway Yard, all the locomotives get serviced at the engine facility so that they take a ride on the turntable, get serviced, fueled, and then go back out on another train. It was an interesting concept because the benchwork on the Timber River Railway with the old turntable was 2 inches thick in some spots, and trying to mount the turntable was interesting. And I've come up with a kink on how to do that, or a little hint on how to do that.
Okay.
So the people that have thick styrofoam benchwork now can mount that table without having to use those little screws in those little holes.
Okay, John, so we wanted to show people the turntable in action. We wanted people to get a chance to see the 110-foot turntable operate and work within your service facility.
So this is a set of road locomotives that came back from a mine run, and it's going to get serviced in the Alloway engine facility. So it gets onto the turntable, it gets set into a stall track. The locomotives are serviced, and then eventually it'll go back out again on another train. And that happens about 30 times during an operating session.
And I understand that you had the need for a slightly larger turntable, but you only had so much room to work with.
Well, as you can see in the picture right now, those two locomotives just fit on the turntable appropriately, and the 5-foot shorter turntable wasn't sufficient space, so you had to separate the locomotives. This way here we can keep them together as pairs, which makes operating the engine facility a little bit more efficient.
Okay, so what you're doing right now is
I'm going to select track 6.
Okay.
And I'm going to select the head end of the turntable to come to track 6. and the advanced control module will line up the track, stop the turntable at track 6, and also turn the power on to track 6.
And that's one thing that we've gotten some questions about from our modelers is the advanced control module, how it works, what it can do for your layout. And that's kind of what we're showing here is that and the turntable working in unison and delivering the locomotives where they need to be.
And so the locomotives get put in the stall, the maintenance crews do their work. Another set of locomotives is selected, and it will wind up going out on the next train, and this happens with the hostler during an operating session continuously. So now the locomotives are in the stall. We're going to line up stall track 3 by doing the same thing, selecting the 3 track and pushing the control button. The power shuts off. It turns the power on for track 3.
Yeah, you can hear it turn off the sound on the locomotives there with the power cutting out.
And that's somewhat important when you have 50 locomotives in the engine facility if you don't want to go deaf. And so now we bring out the next set of locomotives, and this happens to be a pair of demonstrators that were refurbished by the Timber River Railway crew into their as-delivered GP20 paint scheme.
Well, that's excellent. That's such a beautiful scheme. You love to see it get put to good use.
And I've changed some of my motive power slightly to incorporate some of the Walthers Proto 2000 GB20s into the scheme. Now we want to wind up going to a outbound track, so we select the outbound track on the keypad and select which end of the locomotive we want, and now we're going to put the head end there, and the turntable will go to stall track 21 and stop. And we can come off the turntable with the next set of locomotives for the next train.
It's a smooth operation.
Yeah, I wound up having to strip this entire area of all the scenery and the track that was there before. And then I made a template to lay out the turntable and to also lay out the approach tracks to the roundhouse, because I had to fit the roundhouse in a specific spot. And after I did that, I wound up cutting the hole larger so to take the increased 5 feet of turntable space, and sawed that into the base that was existing. And then I started by laying out the floor of the roundhouse lined up with the turntable tracks without the roundhouse in place, just the floor of the roundhouse. And then after I got the turntable installed, I started putting in some stall tracks and built the roundhouse in place. And of course, we've added a little scenery to make it look like a real operating roundhouse.
Well, the end result is certainly great. Is there any sort of pre-installation considerations you might suggest for people, things that they do for pre-work?
Well, I think I made the jig out of a couple of pieces of styrene to predetermine where the hole for the turntable had to be cut. And in my situation, I was doing it trying to enlarge an existing turntable pit, so I had to be very accurate that I didn't wind up cutting out too far in one spot and leaving a hole in the benchwork.
Right.
And so I made a styrene template, and I also made a layout of the floor of the roundhouse in paper or cardstock so that I could combine the styrene pieces that I used for a template along with the cut out for the floor of the roundhouse so that I get both things aligned, along with the existing trackage.
So in the measure twice, cut once sort of model, you made sure that everything was exact before you made any cuts.
It paid off. It paid off, and as you can see from the installation, it worked pretty well.
I understand that you've got one other tip or trick that you want to share with us. Why don't we go ahead and do that now?
Well, I had a little problem in installing the new turntable in the existing benchwork because I had some different thicknesses of plywood, and the little 3/4 inch screw that comes with it with the washer wasn't sufficiently long enough.
Sure.
And trying to fish the screw when you're laying on your back under the existing turntable into that little hole was pretty hard for us old guys. So I took a tap and I tapped the bosses around the base of the turntable that are used for mounting the turntable with a 256 tap. And then I went to my local hardware store and I found some 256 threaded rod, and I cut off a piece which is about 3/8 of an inch longer than the benchwork, threaded the rod into all of the holes, drilled the proper holes in the benchwork, and then wind up being able to just slip the turntable with the threaded rod into the hole that was drilled according to the installation guide.
Excellent.
Now we have a threaded rod sticking out. You put the washer on and then put on a 256 nut. And you do that for all of the I think there's 8 of them around there. And it's much easier to do when you're underneath the benchwork. And so I think that's a hint for how to install it when you have different thicknesses of base that you're mounting it to.
John, can you also run us through the installation of the advanced control module?
Well, it was kind of interesting. I put the initial control panel in, and then I wound up getting the advanced control module, and I had to read through the instructions several times to figure out how I wanted to use it. And I decided to put a 3x4 digital keypad in, along with an LED readout, so that I could push the track number, push either head or tail for the turntable to get it to rotate in the correct direction, and then wind up having the number actually read out on this digital panel. And it turned out to be about 50 wires that went from the digital advanced control module to the keypad and to the lights and to all the segments on the LED to show which track was lined up to. But it works absolutely fabulous.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. This is a general overview of the advanced control module, the interface that you've built up here. This is all custom work. Why don't you tell us a little more about it?
So over in the right hand of the picture is the control panel that comes with the turntable. And I added to it the advanced control module, which is in the lower center of the picture. And in addition to that, I added a relay panel, which is just to the left of the advanced control module, which turns the track power off and on, and it's wired and connected to the advanced control module. And then I've also added, for simplicity of selecting tracks, the keyboard, the 12-button keyboard, along with a digital display to show which track you've selected. So when you want to select a track, you go to the keyboard, push the track number you want, select which end of the turntable you want to align to that track, and the number of the track that you've selected shows on the digital readout.
Excellent. All right, so now we're going to give you an overview of the interlocking tower CTC panel. John, can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, the Saunders panel is used during the operation of the railroad, and the yardmaster controls that. And in order to install the roundhouse and the extended stalls, I had to remove the old Saunders control panel, and I made a new one out of a piece of 1/8-inch aluminum and made it a little bit more compact and efficient, and it's shown in the picture. It's made out of a piece of 1/8-inch aluminum with LEDs and a couple of switches mounted on it, but it controls the signals for the input and outbound traffic into the Alloway yard. So anyway, we've aligned the track, and I've aligned the NCE system to the locomotive. We're going to back the locomotive out in the turntable. And then we're going to select lead track 21 on the keypad and push the tail end of the track so that it lines up, so that we can back the train or the locomotive out onto the train and have it depart Alloway Yard.
All right, John, so you've done a really nice job weathering the pit here. It gives a lot of life to the scene, makes it look very authentic. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and how you went about doing that?
Well, I looked at a number of pictures of turntable pits, on the internet, and said, hey, there's a lot of grass and weeds and grows in it. Plus, there's all kinds of debris that just happens to fall in that's left there because no one cleans it out. And I tried to copy that using different colors of ballast and cinders. There's some railroad ties in there. There's some scrap pieces of wood. There's an old pallet. Again, making sure that I covered the center hole in the turntable so I didn't get dirt on the turntable contacts, and also making sure that I'm very careful not to get the sand and grit into the gearing around the outside rim of the table. And I put it in place. I colored the walls of the pit with chalk colors.
Okay.
And then eventually I sealed everything so that it didn't move around with my typical white glue and water and detergent mix, and let it dry for a day, and vacuumed everything out, and then reinstalled the turntable.
So I understand that when it comes to cleaning the turntable, you've got a trick for that too. Can you show us?
Sure, I can do that. I've got a tip. During the installation of the turntable and doing the ballasting of the turntable pit and ballasting around it, you're liable to get a piece of gravel or ballast or grass or fuzz into the gears on the turntable itself, which will eventually damage the mechanism if it's not cleaned out. So I built a styrofoam block so that I can take the turntable out and I can very gently put it over the top of this block that I built, like that, so that it protects the handrails and it protects the control house and the center pivot. And then you can wind up looking at the gears that drive the turntable and are able to take a very fine tweezer, rotate the gears, and pick out the piece of ballast or the piece of fuzz that's causing it to jump or operate erratically, so that you don't continue to use it that way and damage the turntable. And this little piece of styrofoam makes it available to the point that you always have a spot that you can put the table and not worry about damage to detail.
All right, John, so this is quite a dramatic scene that you've got here. Why don't you tell us a little about it?
Well, after I installed the turntable, and I was down here one evening, and I was looking at it and said, boy, it would really look interesting if we had some lights to illuminate the new turntable. And so I wound up going through the Walthers catalog and found some Wiesmann floodlights. And I ordered a few of those. And after I put the floodlights in, I said, boy, it still needed something else. So I put some LED strip lights into the roundhouse, and it makes a very, very interesting scene. I think pretty spectacular, with the power plant and the transfer table in the background and the roundhouse and the turntable in the foreground.
Absolutely. All right, so hopefully that gives you a better understanding of the brand new Cornerstone turntables. You got a chance to see the all-way shops. You got a chance to see the Timber River Railway. John, thank you very much for inviting us out today and giving us a chance to see.
Thank you. It was a pleasure having you visit the Timber River Railway.
The pleasure is all ours. If you want more information, you can check it out at walthers.com, or you can go over to our Facebook page, Facebook.com/Walthers Trains, and you can see some photos. You can see a photo album with some other descriptions about what's going on there to see the replacement in action. Thank you for joining us.